Okay, so in this video, I want to go over the great debate, which one is better, low volume training or high volume training? Now, this is a common conversation or a common debate, and people will argue for either side being superior than the other. And it's true, there are arguments for either one being better than the other in some contexts. Now, this conversation or this debate is further perpetuated by the fact that there's huge, famous, inspirational, historical figures in the world of bodybuilding, such as the likes of Dorian Yates, who won the Mr. Olympia competition several times and was literally the best in the world. And he was famous for really pushing the idea that low volume training is just superior. And he's quite famous for only performing one working set per exercise in his own training, where he would take the set all the way to failure and oftentimes beyond. So there's huge historical figures pushing this idea. There's also groups of people that have gotten into their own personal habits with training and formed their own personal preferences based on the results that they see and the enjoyment that they get in doing so. And then thus forms this argument that low volume training versus high volume training, there must be one better than the other. Now, what I want you to understand, and the actual truth at the root of this, is context is everything, especially in fitness. And essentially, every human being wants to operate within their own recovery capacity. So you take an individual like Dorian Yates, and some people can look at Dorian Yates and say, well, he's the best in the world, and this is what he does, so therefore I should do that, therefore I will make great progress as well. And whereas I can appreciate that thinking, and it's very simplistic, it's not necessarily true, because Dorian Yates trains like Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates lifts Dorian Yates-sized weights, and the likelihood is you don't. Therefore, the fatigue cost from Dorian Yates training is going to be exponentially greater than the average person. Therefore, to operate within his recovery capacity, he needs to do significantly less than the next person. So is it true that he could only get away with doing one working set and no more per exercise and still make progress? We don't know. We're not Dorian Yates, and we likely never will be. But what you can do is make your own personal assessments and essentially figure out what you can recover from. Because one thing that we do know is more volume does equal more muscle growth, almost in a linear fashion until the point where you reach where you can't essentially recover from anymore. So within your recovery capacity, one thing we know for a fact is more volume equals more muscle growth. So if you can do more volume and recover from it, do it. You don't need to train like Dorian Yates, although that can be cool and it can be enjoyable and it can be fun. The likelihood is you're not Dorian Yates, and the fatigue cost that you experience from your training is likely not as great as his, as sad as that might seem. Therefore, you might want to do a little bit more volume. But that being said, at the end of the day, nobody can argue with what produces results, because what we are here to do is produce results. And another consideration is some people can genuinely, from a genetic standpoint, tolerate a little bit more volume than other people. If someone has a little bit higher of a proportion of oxidative muscle fibers, or at least we suspect so, or they're a bit more endurance based, naturally, typically they can train with a little bit higher volume. And then also another consideration is if someone thinks they're training to failure but they're not, typically they can also recover from a bit more volume because their proximity to failure is different. So all of these factors, your genetics, how hard you train, even how often you train, how big you are, how strong you are, they all affect the fatigue cost that you experience from the average set or the average workout. And that will dictate the volume you should do. Because ultimately we need to recover, but if we want to grow as fast as we possibly can, we need to do as much as we can recover from and still see appreciable results in a way that keeps us injury-free, progressing in a sustained manner. So the conversation of low volume versus high volume has some validity, although it's almost a useless conversation in most cases. So hopefully this adds a little bit of clarity onto what you should actually do. Everybody's a little bit different, but we want to find what works for us, and that's it. So hope this helps. If you've got any questions, message me directly, and I'll chat to you in the next one.